to do pledge since we already did that? Can we do it again? Okay. We just did the Pledge of Allegiance at our last reorganization meeting, so we will not do that for this meeting. The Board of School Trustees of Lebanon Community School Corporation will meet in regular session at 7 p.m. on Monday, January 13th at the Herman B. Wells Community Center. Work sessions of the board are public meetings allowing the community to be present to hear all questions and dialogue from the board regarding important matters of the school corporation. While work sessions are not open for public comment, we will provide blank comment question forms that community members may submit. These written forms, in addition to our online comment form, will be read and considered by the administration and school board. And also, as a reminder, school board members and the administrators are always available for phone calls, emails, or in-person meetings if you so desire. There is a time for public comment at each regular business meeting of the school board, which actually will be next Tuesday. So I would like to turn this meeting over to Dr. Milliman.
Thank you, Mrs. Hutchinson. Appreciate it. This evening, we have Dr. Jerome McKibben of McKibben Demographics to give us the most recent 10-year enrollment forecast for the district. Dr. McKibben is very familiar, of course, with our district and the work. We've commissioned an enrollment forecast going back to 2019. I think we updated it in 2023. The board approved an annual update. I think the hourglass sand is running out for Mr. McKibben as far as retirement goes. He keeps teasing me that hopefully we can make it to the end of that approval, and he continues to do that for us. And maybe he'll do an old friend a favor and keep those rolling for us. But there's a lot of good information this evening that he can share about our district and how it relates to the options that we're considering right now through our redistricting work. And I have some slides queued up as well at the conclusion of his presentation, should the board have any questions. So hopefully between the two of us, with what we have queued up, we'll be able to answer your questions. I'll turn it over to Dr. McKibben.
Thank you, Dr. Milliman, Madam President, members of the board. Yes, we just, my wife retired last year. We downsized our home from last year. That was Rock Hill, South Carolina on the screen. Now it's Daphne, Alabama. And we moved into the new house, and she decided she wants a pool. So I'm still working. Keeps talking about a patio next. This may never end. Anyway, real quick overview from last year. 2 key points. These are forecasts, not projections. We're building a population forecast for each one of your attendance areas, 0 to 4, 85 plus, male, female. Go out 10 years. The results of that pop forecast drives the enrollment forecast. We don't use trend analysis. Everything's built specifically for Lebanon School District and its 4 attendance areas. 2, don't let Daphne, Alabama fool you. I'm from Indiana. So I've been studying Indiana demographics for 40 years now, and I can't believe I just said that. When you're doing forecasts, you have to have assumptions. These are broad socioeconomic, demographic parameters we use to build our forecast models. They're in your report. I want to go over what I call the big 4. There we go. These are the 4 assumptions that have the highest possibility of having error or variation into it. Number 1 is B. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate stays between 5 and 7% for the life of the forecast. This morning it's at 5 or 7.1%. We're getting back up there again. Okay. If it stays in that range, your housing market will probably stay pretty healthy. All right. If it gets back up to 7.7 towards 8%, it's going to start being a drag. I don't think 5% is much of a worry anymore now. I know there's a whole generation of young people who think the normal mortgage rate should be 3.5%, 4%. Those days are gone. They're not coming back. My first mortgage when I bought a house was 8.5%. We thought we were robbing the bank, The second assumption I want to go over is maybe on the next one. Your home sales. Most school districts, by most I mean like 90, 95%, have somewhere between 10 and 20% new home construction, 80 to 90% existing home sales, okay? That's the average school district. Existing home sales, far more important than new home construction. Everybody fixates on new home construction because there's nothing there, there's a roof, okay? Wow, it's all growth. But the backbone of it is actually your existing home sales. So when we do our forecast, we do an assumption of existing and new. So here we have 720 and 310. Add those two together. What you need is about 1,000 new homes, new households moving in each year. As John talking to his realtor friend for 2024, it was about 750. You're actually running below what I forecasted. And it's about a 50-50 split. That's extraordinarily rare. I get only about 3 or 4 of the school districts in the state, Westfield, Crown Point, and Northwest Allen are the only other ones in the district that has that kind of a split between their new and existing. So on the 310 new homes, no trouble hitting that. It's to 720. And that's going to become an increasingly more important factor moving forward because the peak of the baby boom is 69 years old today. The front end of it is 79. Go forward 10 years, those numbers are 79, 89. You're going to start seeing more and more elderly empty nesters downsizing and moving out. And this has been the biggest impact of COVID. Forget the deaths, forget the birth drops and all that. The elderly just stopped moving during COVID and never started back up again. We should be seeing increasing numbers of elderly downsizing, and the reason is we never built any elder housing in this country. Did a horrible job on it. They've got no place to go, okay? And there's 2 types of elderly migration. There's what we call voluntary, and you see that tends to be in their 60s. You know, this is where both married couples are still alive, healthy, relatively wealthy. Those are the ones that, you know, will sell the house and move to Myrtle Beach, Florida, Texas, wherever they want to go. You hear about those a lot, but that's only about 15% of elderly migration. Most elderly migration is over the age of 70, and that's what we call involuntary. They're not moving because they want to, they're moving because they have to. It's either they both lose the ability to drive or one of them has died, okay? We've seen below average voluntary migration, particularly the last 5 years. We're going to see above average involuntary migration of the elderly going forward because they're going to be in their 70s. And usually those households only move no more than 50 miles. It tends to be more short-term, short-distance migrations. So that's the dynamic we're going to look for in the future. The fourth variable, and this is Indiana, you can't talk about school enrollment forecasts this state unless you're talking about transfers, okay? We assume the district will have a net negative 550 students transferring out per year. Now that was based on the 23 numbers. Since then, the 24 numbers have come out, and you were negative 563 for this year, so you're pretty much right on what we forecasted on that. And everybody in the state took a big jump the last 2 years when they raised the voucher rule to $225,000. 97% of all households in the state now qualify for private school vouchers. Almost 100% saturation now. 550 sounds high until you consider some of the other, you know, leading suburban school districts in the state. Northwest Allen's negative 500. Westfield is 400. Carmel's about 600. Noblesville's about 800. Hamilton Southeast is negative 2,100. You know, and those districts are all closed. They don't allow people to transfer in. For this district, you've got, you know, about 100 coming in, about 460 going out public, and then another 180 to the non-publics. So just because you're a suburban school district, the way the laws are written in Indiana, you tend to have relatively large out transfers because all public to non-public are counted as negative against you, okay? And when they raised that voucher limit up to 226, remember, when they first passed that law, that was to help poor people go to private school. Remember that. I never forget it. We're going to hold that at 550. Another assumption here is the state doesn't change any of the transfer laws, which is quite honestly kind of a dumb assumption because they change something every year, okay? Now what was the law they're going through there? Any district with more than 50% of their kids net transfer out, they're going to take them over and turn them into charters. There's only 5 districts in the state that fall in that category right now, but they'll do something, you know. So given the way the laws are written right now, we're going to hold it at that. So the number one predictive variable for population and enrollment change is not births, it's not death, it's not migration. It's the age structure of your population. How is your population distributed across the life course? This is a pop pyramid of Lebanon School Corporation for the 2020 census. And it's pretty easy to read. 0 to 4 is preschool, 5 to 9 is elementary, 10 to 14 is middle, 15 to 19 is high school. 20 to 34 is referred to as prime childbearing ages. 80% of all births occur to women between the ages of 20 and 34 years old. When you see changes in numbers of births in an area, it's not so much due to a change in birth rate, but due to a change in number of women in prime childbearing age. Okay? You can have a total fertility rate of 9. If you don't have women between the ages of 20 and 34 years old, you're not going to have that many births. Okay? 35 to 54 are the ages where most people have kids in school. All right? There are exceptions to that. I was one of them. I was a first-time father at 40, but you know, that's where you're going to, if you have a whole bunch of parents out here, they're going to be in that age group primarily. 55 to 69, that we're called the empty nest ages. This is where it gets confusing for people. You got the Smith family down the road, been living there for 20 years. 10 years ago, there was mom, dad, and 2 kids there. But now the kids have grown up, graduated high school, moved away. Same household, same owners, but instead of 4 people there, there's only 2. So that's why, you know, looking at household size is very key, and that's where your yield factor comes into as well. As you can see here in 2020 census, you've got a bit of a bubble population between ages of 55 and 69. Okay. 70 and over, that's your turnover ages. If I know home ownership rate and age of the homeowner, that gives me a proxy variable on how many households are probably going to turn over in the next 10 years, along with the mortality rate. And as you can see from this pyramid, if you bring everything forward 10 years, go out to 2030, that 50 to 59 bar is now 65 to 69. The number of people and households in the district that will be going into that turnover ages is going to do nothing but go up over the next 10 to 15 years. That current bubble at 30 to 34 is now going to be in the early 40s, okay? They're all going to have kids in school, but I can guarantee you most of them won't have any more kids after that. Most people, I was kind of the exception, have enough sense not to have kids after the age of 40, you know, for a host of reasons. Now, we always also call this your demographic fingerprint, because no 2 areas have the same size and shape of population pyramid. And you can see that when you look at the 4 attendance areas, okay? Here's Central, okay? A couple things jump out. Older population, we're talking about this turnover of elderly households. This is an area that's going to see it, you know, probably stronger than the district as a whole. But notice the 0 to 4 bar is smaller than 5 to 9. Move that forward 5 years, and they become 5 to 9. Their elementary enrollment would drop, not because of out-migration, there's just smaller age cohorts coming in. More on that later. Harney, okay, not quite, more of an even distribution, their population. Also have a few more apartments in the area. Perry Worth doesn't look anything like the district, okay? This is where all the young households are moving in. But here's the really interesting thing on Perry Worth. Notice how the 0 to 4 bar is actually bigger than the 5 to 9. People say, oh, got all these rooftops coming in here. Well, let's look at our housing yields and all that. Well, when you look at student yields, it's population 5 to 17 years old. It's not picking up the preschoolers, okay? That's why you need to look at the demographic data and say, what's the size of the cohorts coming in? So you don't mistake building growth for enrollment growth. What's the true correlation here? Because the factor most people forget is time, okay? Some are going to have to age in the district, some are going to move into the district. There's two different phenomena going on at the same time. So a lot of Perry Worth growth, particularly in the last couple, 3 years, has not been due to households moving in, it's due to kids aging in. That's a totally different phenomenon. And then, of course, Stokes, again, looks more like the district average. Again, a bit of a bubble there in the 60s. They're going to start seeing some turnover probably by the end of this decade. We have forecasted population change. The district as a whole growing 11% between 20 and 30. It's a pretty healthy growth rate, far more than the national average will be, but not evenly distributed. Stokes at 12, Perry Worth at 20, 8 and 4 for the other two. Now, before I think of that, one reason Stokes is up about 12% is because it's coming off of a smaller base. You know, Central and Harney are 6,000, Perry Worth at 7,000. Stokes is only 5,000. So, the same amount of people moving in, looks like a bigger percentage. But with all the building going on in Perry Worth, that's a key issue right there for 20% growth rate, which is probably why you're talking about redistricting right now. Householders 35 to 54, pretty evenly distributed, 34%, or 33% right now. And I just kind of like to make all school districts. There's not a school district in this country where households with school-aged kids make up a majority of their households. Not a one. 33% is about the average. But households 65 and older, you're already at 20% in the 2020 census, okay? And that's what's going up. And you've got Central already at 31% of the households over the age 65. So that, again, is where you're going to start seeing the turnover of elderly households coming first, probably in the middle of the decade. Then you have owners versus renters. The district is 70%, but you've got a wide range there from 56% at Stokes to 83% at Perry Worth. This is an underappreciated variable, owner versus renter, because they have two completely different dynamics, okay? Renters tend to be younger, still forming their families, still having kids, tend to be poor because they're younger, and they move an average every 2.5 years. Owners are older, have completed their childbearing for the most part, and move an average every 14, 15 years. So one's a much more static, wavy trend. The other one is much more short term. So you've got one area that's overwhelmingly owner occupied, Perry Worth, and Stokes, on the other hand, has almost 50-50 owner versus renter. Completely different dynamics. Single person households, about 28%. Sounds high, but it's actually pretty close to an average. You know, most people don't realize how many single person households there are. But single person over the age of 65, this is one where probably one of the homeowners has died already, because it takes group quarters populations out. And again, Central at 15, already at 15%. All the indicators are there that you're going to start seeing your turnover of existing households starting in Central, if not right now, in the immediate future, and be in full swing by 2030. Now, this is my favorite data from the 2020 census. This is the individual year of age, okay? And this is where we look at cohort size. okay? So in 2020, the 5-year-olds, that's your kindergarten. 6-year-olds are first grade, 7-year-olds are seventh, so on. But now in 2024, the 1-year-old column, they're now 5 years old. That's your kindergarten. 2-year-olds are first, 3-year-olds are second, 4-year-olds are third. And we can look at the relative size of the cohorts coming in. Now people will say, oh, we've had a big increase this year. It must be growing and building. Well, maybe, maybe not, okay? I'll bring up 2 of them here. Look at Perry Worth, okay, from starting to 5-year-olds, going backwards. 101, 106, 114, 96, then pops up to 141. We had that small cohort in kindergarten last year at Perry Worth. Why? You didn't have that many 2-year-olds born. This is a small cohort, and it jumped up this year. Well, yeah, it should have jumped up by about 45 kids. So conversely, you look at Stokes, 61, 79, 70, 54, back up to 77. You look at their enrollment this year, Stokes has an abnormally small kindergarten. You notice that, and you'll see it in the data when we look at the forecast. Decline, people moving away. No, it's just a small cohort. This is how we, use the data to kind of ferret out, any possible error that might be in there. That's why you don't use trend analysis. It's because, maybe a 1-year abnormality, and as frequently is the case. So we're using this to say, okay, how much of this is due to growth or decline? How much of this is due to a cohort change? For the district, we use something we call the market share. And the numbers in red are your first grade for each year. What we'll do is we take your actual enrollment for each year and compare it to what the census count was. So if I can get this thing to work. Oops, wrong way. I'm supposed to have an arrow here. There we go.
You also have a laser pointer.
There, I like the arrow better. Okay, this number right there above the arrow, that red one, 258 or 253. Hey, it's remarkable. I can read that with my eyes, let me tell you. 81%, thank you. 81% of 311. Okay, now 2000 and 2021, this is the depths of COVID, okay? So your numbers can be artificially low, but past that, you'll notice that, stop that. I like my laser pointer better.
There's one on that.
All right, I'll get there. That number there pops up to 85%, 88, 90%. That's in migration. If the percentages go up, it's in migration. If it goes down, it's out migration or out transfer, okay? So if you look 81% for, glad you're all getting this on film, you doing up here doing this, so 81% first grade, 89, 90, 92. You keep getting a larger proportion, or your enrollment is a larger proportion of your census count, again, a measurement of in-migration, okay? So, and it's across the board in pretty much all the school districts, or all the attendance areas. So, and unlike most suburban school districts that have a 0 to 4 deficit because they don't have enough births, you guys don't. You have enough births in the district to maintain your enrollment. In fact, of all of the collar counties around Indianapolis, you're one of the very few schools. I think the highest or the second highest fertility rate. I don't know why, and I'm not going to go down that road, but you do. So, whereas a lot of your neighboring districts to the south and to the east need in-migration to make up for their birth deficit, you guys don't. So it tends to be more of a direct impact, either through new home construction or existing home sales. Okay, now it won't work. There we go. Okay. All of this goes into the population forecast. This is the total. There's one for each one of the attendance areas. And there's 2 ways to read this. You can look at an age group over time. 5 to 9 is basically your elementary. So it goes from 1528 in 2020, 1710, 2100 in 2025, then 20, about the same number in 2035. See how your enrollment's changing. Or follow an age cohort through time. Thank you. The 0 to 4 in 2020 is now 5 to 9 in 2025. They're 10 to 14 in 2030. They're 15 to 19s in 2035. The bottom here is median age. That's the age where half the population's older, half is younger. It's going up. Why? Because you've got more people moving in and an aging population. And your biggest out-migration flow is 18 to 22-year-olds. And that's accents that. Births stay relatively flat. The birth rate stays the same, and the number of women in prime childbearing age stays the same too. The deaths go up, and the reason the deaths go up is because of an aging population. Net migration, 890 here for the 20 to 25 period. Now people always say, well, we had more than 890 people move in. Well, you did. Okay. Actually, you've had like about 5,000 people move in and about 4,000 move out. The net effect is about 890. And the change, again, 11% growth rate for the decade is going to be quite healthy. This drives the enrollment forecast. Now, again, the analogy I use here is a bucket of water. If I have a bucket of water, and I'm pouring water in the top, and there's a hole in the bottom. As long as I'm pouring in faster than it's running out the bottom, the level will rise. But if for some reason the hole in the bottom gets bigger, and it's now going out faster than I'm pouring in, if I pour at the same rate, level will drop. Enrollment works the same way. What's the size of the first and kindergarten cohorts coming in? What's the size of the 12th grade cohorts going out? And the big reason that if you look at the total enrollment for the district, I didn't want to do that. The total enrollment for the district slows down after 2030. One reason for that is over the last 5 years, your 12th grade graduating class averaged about 230. After 2030, it's going to average about 280, 290. You got about 50 more kids going out. So even if you keep, if you look at the kindergarten, first grade numbers, I've got them going up, at a pretty steady rate year to year. But that rate of increase in those cohorts is not as fast as the rate of increase in your 12th grade cohorts. That's why the overall district's slowing down. Okay, same thing here you'll see with your overall elementary enrollment. Your 5th grade enrollments were running 260, 270. After 2030, it's going to be up around 330. So yeah, you've got more people moving in, you have bigger cohorts coming into K and 1, but you've also got bigger cohorts going on to the middle school. So those cohort sizes are averaging out. And again, that's why you see that slowdown here in growth in the elementary enrollment. It's not because you're in migration slowing down, you got kids aging through the system, okay? So again, time is the factor that people always forget about. And that wave in your enrollment is going to work its way into the middle school and into the high school. See, I think it's 2032 here where you got the peak of that wave is hitting your middle school. You go up like 44 students. So your high school, which is having about just under 1,100 right now, you're going to be looking at about 1,300 about 10 years from now. Key point on the high school is if you stopped building today, then build another house for the next 5 years, 80% of that growth would still occur in the high schools because they're already here. They don't have to move in. That's just a wave coming through. So I did it in 25 minutes. That's good for me. Now I have pop pyramids and enrollment forecasts for all the individual attendance areas later on. And if anybody has a question or anything specific, and then there's John's slides you put on afterwards.
So I think one of the questions that I've gotten is how we're projecting, when you're looking at Perry Worth and you're talking about the new homes being built and things like that, how are you looking at specifics in terms of getting those numbers? Are you dealing with the municipalities directly? I mean, are you looking at what those projects being built by developers is? What's that process look like in terms of how you're getting those numbers?
Well, it's like Peabody Falls, according to the county and them, 312 single-family homes. We use that as an example. The rest of them same way. The developers, county, it's got to be platted, recorded, permitted, and all that. They're very, so people throw 312 homes. Oh my God. Well, yeah, but what they don't tell you is that's a 5-year build-out. So you're looking at like 60 homes a year. The other thing we're getting from this price point, how much they're going to cost. There's a great rule in demography. You can have money, you can have kids, but you can't have both. Anybody's parent knows what I'm talking about. The more expensive the home, fewer the yield, and the quicker the impact. Most people don't drop $500,000-$600,000 in a house and say, hey, I was having another kid. They're done. We come in, the fact, and we look at the yield, because we're mapping all the yields from this data too, from your geocoded enrollment data versus what's building with on the ground, is trying to figure out how many preschoolers are in there. If it's a $200,000, $300,000 home, much higher rate of preschoolers moving in. People say, wow, we're going to, a kid per household coming in these 300 homes. Well, if maybe not, because if both of their kids are preschoolers, you're going to look at the yield could be zero. You may not see the full impact of that house coming in for 5 to 7 years, okay? So each piece of the data is a piece of the puzzle. There is no silver bullet variable, okay? And you've got to put all these pieces together and see how they relate over time. So again, as long as the developers are honest, and the data from the county is sound, and we found it to be very sound, every time we used it before, I have no reason to doubt it. You can't sneak in and build something. It's got to be approved and platted and all that. The key point is, and this is where the interest rates and all that come in, what's the timeline on build out? And if it goes above 7% for 30-year fixed rate, that timeline is going to get stretched out. It was a mere 15 years ago when everybody said, oh, we're going to build, it's going to be going on forever, and the housing crisis hit. There's still pipe fields down in Hendricks County that have been built out from 15 years ago, So I'm always a little suspect on that. And, the other thing coming on the forward is you're going to have more existing homes on the market. And on the short term, new home construction wins out. People want the granite countertops, the indoor plumbing, all that nice stuff, But on the long term, existing home sales will always win out because they have an advantage that developers don't have. They can cut their price. Developers are working on a pretty thin profit margin. I'm sitting on a house, ton of equity, I want to sell it, I want $40,000 less. Sure, I'm still walking with a lot of money. Developers can't do that. So if you start seeing a lot of those existing homes get dumped on the market, and you having a hard time coming with down payment, or you got to start talking about price points, that's going to win out. That was probably a much longer answer than I needed to give you for my question.
It's helpful though.
Has any of your research taken into account the fact that a lot of young people, like we have 2 college-age sons, who are not moved back home permanently yet, but a lot of young people are moving back home with their parents because they cannot afford to live on their own,
Excellent
or
point.
grandparents are raising grandchildren.
2 different things there. Okay, don't mix the 2 up.
Okay.
You're right on both of them though, okay? When we moved to Alabama, we didn't even let our son know our forwarding address. Of course, he's working in Atlanta now. No, I'm not worried about that. He's in good shape. But the number of kids after college moving home is going up, housing costs, no argument to that at all. That's entirely different to moving home. Hey, mom, got a boyfriend, girlfriend, we're gonna live in your basement and have kids, okay? That's a whole different situation. That's like maybe 3% of them, okay? So living with their parents, what that's actually doing, that's one reason why age of first birth in this country is now 28. They don't get out of their parents' house till they're 26, okay? We've postponed adolescence to the mid-20s, all right? Grandparents raising kids, multi-generational households. Has it gone up? Absolutely, no doubt about it, okay? What's percentage of it in this area? About 2%, okay? You notice it, and it also kind of goes hand in hand with divorce too. You see them move back with the parents. The thing about kids and parents and migration, a rule in demography is always follow the money, okay? If the parents are doing better financially than the kids will come to the parents. And we've seen this, you know, people in their 30s and 40s. The parents are elderly and all that, and if they're not doing that great in some other part of the country, they will, quote, come home, take care of their parents. Conversely, if the kids are doing better with than their parents are, my wife and I had this situation too. Her dad couldn't take care of herself anymore. We both had jobs in South Carolina. We weren't going to go back to Pennsylvania. He's going to come to us. So follows whichever one's doing better. So there's always a money aspect into this. So if you see grandparents, quote, raising kids, it's more likely childcare actually is what's going on, because the price of childcare is through the roof right now. Well, that's pretty good. If grandma or grandpa is living 2 miles down, they're not in the same house, but they're doing the same thing. Yeah, that's much more common. But the kids coming home and having babies in the basement, nah, forget about it. That's just not going to happen. So, but yeah, your sons will be living with you sometime in the next few years. So.
Any other questions from board members or comments?
What we've seen is we've gotten hit by is some apartments.
Mhm.
Some of the, without us, I guess, it came in quickly with the, was it section
42.
42. So government subsidized. But is that an anomaly, or is that going to be, do you see that continuing that within our district? Is that just a once off that it's added to, or will we continue to see growth?
Most of the last decade, most of the big urban areas in the country tried to get away from Section 8 subsidized housing and shut it down. Atlanta, for example, shut down 65,000 subsidized housing units, just raised the whole area. Well, they went out to the suburbs. Okay, so it's, most areas you have to get approval from whatever the local governmental agency is, county, the municipality, whatever, to accept or become subsidized housing. You just can't do it on your own accord. So that's more of a planning issue. So same thing with mobile homes, you know, which is virtually, Indiana used to be mobile home heaven. It's hard to get a mobile home court in now. So a lot of it's got to do with your planning rules and regulations. But to answer your question there, I think it's a one-off right now. So unless the local political establishment decides they're going to let more in. And again, apartments work the same way as houses. You know, the higher the rent, smaller number of household size, and the older they tend to be. Subsidized housing, very, very low rent, tends to have a lot, but not only have a lot of kids, they have a lot of preschoolers in it, okay? So you don't see as much impact on your enrollment immediately. It's only if they age into the system.
We
And
saw
give-
it immediately, though.
Yeah.
We saw
Right.
busloads on all
Very- yeah.
scales.
Well,
of
yeah.
ages.
You saw part of it immediately. I guarantee you there's far more
Okay.
preschoolers there. If they stay put and age into your system, you think you saw something now? Wait till 3 years from now. But that's a relatively small number right now, and it can be somewhat isolated. That's why you need to keep track of that. Are they going to allow more of it? Are they going to? And they can't go back in the urban areas because I know Indy's not going to put any more up,
Give it a couple slides.
you know, and they're sure not going to build them in Carmel. So,
Mr. Martin, could you go to slide 20? So I just wanted to kind of bottom line it a little bit from, you know, our conversation and for the board with where our plans are. This would be the slide for Perry Worth and the projections year to year. And again, sorry, forecast. It's not a projection, it's forecast.
good man.
And again, all of those assumptions being held in place, which is 22 separate assumptions. Dr. McKibben gave the 4 kind of more high leverage ones. This outlines that the timing of our current redistricting process is on target and should be done to begin the 25-26 school year.
Because this
If you look-
forecast is based off of current boundaries, right?
Current boundaries,
Current
yes. This is if
boundaries,
the
yes.
boundaries were not to change, this
Right.
is what the forecasted numbers were. And he's just about dead on the screws at 6:01 in October as we are today. That's almost almost exactly where we are, just a few more probably. So that shows that. Then if you could go to slide 26, Mr. Martin. It's 26, keep going. Keep going, keep going. Oh, you're going too far. Maybe I need to drive. Hang on a second, I'll drive. Let's make sure I get the right, here we go.
I like the last one.
Yeah. This is when Dr. McKibben has reviewed our 3 options and looked at enrollment forecast and overlaid it. I asked him to give us some feedback on those current options, and this is, just wanted you to get those in front of the board. This will be published as well. Ask him about whether it is wise in your plans to shift enrollment. I think when you go back to the forecasted enrollment at Perry Worth, we need to shift that enrollment. I think that's clear. And one of the things that plays into a couple of these bullet points is what Dr. McKibben talked about with aging out populations and turnover of existing homes, and the fact that we may see some enrollment growth not far from where we're seated right now as those existing homes turn over.
If we can go back to the Perry Worth forecast for a second, there's two key points in there I want to make that I think needs to be, and not only the board, but the public needs to understand this too. Okay, got Perry Worth, and again, current boundaries, going to 601 to 853, okay? Pretty healthy growth rate. But note 2 things. One, this thing.
Well, you're not on anymore, I'm on. What do you want to
All
say?
right.
Tell me when to
All
start.
right, kindergarten this year.
Okay.
Okay, this year, okay?
Gotcha.
And then first grade. See how those numbers go up of 123, 125, 128? I'm taking first grade across the line there. Nice, slow, steady increase, right? Okay. Till about 2029. Okay, and it still keeps going up, but then the overall change just goes pretty much flat. You only pick up 2 or 3, 4 students a year. Why? Because your 5th grade cohorts go above 150. This is that time thing I'm talking about. Every child in Perry Worth today, K through 5, is out of there by 2030. Okay? They're in middle school and high school. Your 2030 cohort of first graders isn't even born yet. Okay? So that's why you can't think, well, you'd have to have all of the same amount of growth plus some just to break even, which is what we get you forecasted to do. That's why it slows down. It's not because there's fewer people moving in or the in-migration slowing down or they're not building as many homes as before. It's because they're aging out. You know, you're going from 90, 100 kids in 5th grade moving on to 150. That's an almost 50% increase in cohort size. basic mathematics. Even at the same time when you've got the number of first graders, kindergartens continue going up, but it's not going up as fast as that increase of the size of the cohorts aging out. So this might even actually be your worst case scenario for enrollment for Perry Worth, okay? That's assuming the 30-year fixed rate stays good. They don't have any more problems with the housing market. They don't have that much competition with existing home sales. They build everything they plan on building on the books. Still a pretty healthy increase, but it stops in 2030, folks. You know, unless drop in about 500 subsidized apartment housing units, that would be, it would take something to that magnitude to overwhelm this trend here. So 5 years of boom, we're going to go up to, under current boundaries, over 800, and it stops.
Because I thought that was important for him to point out, because we had some questions about how long until the next time we do this. And, you know, if we're moving to approximately 450 students, 70%-ish, 72% capacity in Perry Worth with any of the options that you're looking at, I just wanted the board to see that
Now you
this is a
know.
pretty, you know, healthy outlook, and it not happening next year. We're not having this conversation, and most likely we're not having this conversation in 10 years because of those cohorts. It's a overlooked, I think is the word you use. It's an overlooked, and understandably, cohorts as they move through. If you see rooftops, you think students, but there's a lot more to it, as Dr. McKibben pointed out. So do you want to drive again? Do you want me to give you back your power here?
Well,
I can do that.
there's the number one thing with forecasting. I always tell people that, okay, everybody here in the room, if you're still here in 2035, you're all going to be 10 years older. And so are your kids. And people don't think about that, okay? And it goes back to the whole thing about the Smith family on the road there 10 years ago. It's a 4-people household. That was one of the big shocks from the 2020 census was my favorite stat from, with 7.4% pop growth in the U.S. the last 10 years. That's about 22 million people. Second slowest decade growth since in the country's history. But the nation's pop grew by 22 million. The under 18 population dropped by 1 million during the same decade, because births have been dropping for the last 15 years in the U.S. So household size went through the floor. Now it went down 0.03, which doesn't sound like a lot, persons per household, until you multiply it by 120 million households, turned into 1 million kids. And virtually every school district in the state had a drop in household size last decade. And again, it's because not only your birth dropped, all your sending areas that surround you had their births drop too. You're all fighting over a smaller pool.
Any questions?
Yeah, anything else? Do you have anything else you want to say?
So I do to my grand crescendo here.
Yeah.
Okay. You need to redistrict. You don't need to build. Pretty much.
When was the last time we were redistricting?
Of any scope, I mean, you count when the new Hattie B. Stokes was opened in 2002, so you're talking 20 plus years. Dr. McKibben points out to me that every district should probably think about it every 10 years, if not for the reasons we've talked about socioeconomically, things that can happen that way within your district, and disparities that can exist over time.
So we're twice behind the 8 ball.
Probably. I mean, just from, not necessarily from a capacity standpoint, but from possibly from balancing it. But we also have the opportunity now with the capacity. Mr. Martin, can you go to, there's a slide, just the one next after this. Just to talk about the capacity, we've used in our options kind of a benchmark of capacities for the elementaries, and you'll see those at, like Harney at 600, Hattie B. Stokes at 575, the new Central at 600. That's based on what we call a 4-section elementary school, right? So 4 sections, K through 5, 600 students. This slide kind of shows the reality, and that will feel pretty full. You know, that will feel like a full, vibrant building with all of those classrooms being used. But each of the building projects, and they've been in all your slides, and they've been on all of our public slides as well, has expandability, but also they have flex classrooms built into the design. So we have more than a 4-section elementary designed into the design. So this slide shows that for the board, that actually Perry Worth with their flex classrooms is at 675, if the flex classrooms are being used as well. We also have 2 classrooms at the front of the building that had traditionally been kindergarten classrooms that we have earmarked for pre-K. So if the enrollment required us to use those down the road, and you're using the flex classrooms plus the pre-K classrooms, Perry Worth could actually have every student in a classroom without portables, and we could be at 725, and that's at 25 students per classroom, which Perry Worth is currently under 25 per classroom as a average class size. Harney's similar, 625. Hattie B. Stokes with flex classrooms is actually 600. Central was at 675, because we have 6 kindergarten classrooms built into that design. So there's more than a 4-section elementary built into the design. So that's kind of what, so that's really 2,575 seats for elementary students, K through 5, and Dr. McKibben's forecast has us at 1975. We'd still be plus 600.
Yeah, the question I'm going to get asked, so I'll ask it now, is, so if we have an extra, 100 or so spots potentially at Perry Worth, why aren't we just opening those up instead of redistricting, putting it off?
Yeah.
Why don't we just put off redistricting, max out what the flex classrooms are for now, and make it work for now?
If you go back to that
About
Perry
2
Worth,
years, you're going to need it.
you go back to
Might
that
as well
Perry
do
Worth
it now.
slide,
It's
you've got,
coming.
yeah, you're not going to want an 800 student building or a 775 student building.
2 things on redistricting. One, why you do it every 10 years. Your distribution of seats stays static. Your distribution of students is always changing, okay? And where you had kids 15, 20 years ago is not where you have elementary kids now. Same thing with your building. And when you have building like you had Perry Worth, it accentuates that, okay? 2, you're talking about school capacity. Anybody who knows anything about education knows you can't have a kid in every seat in every classroom 24, So when we do redistricting, we use 90%. So if the building is built for 700 students, 630 is about what you want to have in there. If you get to 670, 680, you get trailers out back, even though you're only at 98%. So you cut that off. And we had a discussion on this too. I've been doing this for 35 years now, and the one constant is the square foot requirement per student has done nothing but go up the last 3 decades. I don't look for that trend to stop, okay? Buildings that were built for 500 kids 35 years ago now have a design capacity of 440 because the square foot requirements have gone up. So,
But if I'll answer your question too about that from just a functionality standpoint. While we do have those classrooms, it doesn't mean that there wouldn't have to be portables at those buildings, because we have more and more students with high needs. We have, pull-out E&L programs that we need to support. And what I was sharing with the board, those slides, was to really address what Dr. McKibben shared, is you'll get these bubble cohorts that will come through. So I think what you get questions about is, well, what if you need 5 sections of 5th grade for a year? What if you need, and it goes back to 4, but there might be a year where we have, as the cohorts change, that we might have 3 sections of 5th grade, but we have 5 sections of 1st and 5 sections of 2nd. It's a very fluid process. So I was just sharing those capacities with the board to show that we designed flex spaces in the designs. You wouldn't want to be at 100%. It'd be very difficult to function in that, but you could theoretically, right, have those seats there. So we built in flex, I shared that only for the board's education, that we didn't just say everything's full at 6, so we built some flexibility into the design.
4 school districts just worked with last fall in Indiana alone, that they had that very same problem, where they got an elementary that's got to go to an extra section because they got a big cohort going through. And there's no such thing as an extra classroom. But you had 75 increase Perry Worth last year, you get 63 next year. They're coming, they're here. You already have, we know from the census data, you get into the big preschool cohort, we're going to be kindergarten next year. They were already there 4 or 5 years ago, on top of the ones that moved in the last 4 years. You probably should have done this a year and a half ago. But I wouldn't put it off any longer than this because it's already there, okay? What makes this touchy is you're trying to match up the distribution of your students with the distribution of your buildings, okay? And that's always kind of a messy proposition because you got to follow rules. You don't want to split neighborhoods. You want to go down both sides of major streets, you know. You have to consider transportation. You're looking at socioeconomic. There's a lot of factors trying to balance in here when you're trying to do a redistricting. So it's never one silver bullet issue you're trying to, you focus, of course, on size, but you also got to focus on distribution. And we try to do it is draw boundaries that are going to last for at least 5 or 10 years. You don't want to be doing this again 2 or 3 years from now. So.
Yeah, this actually goes to show that where we put the new central is good, putting it in the center. As you see these ebbs and flows, I mean, why Perry Worth, how many years ago was built where it was really from an overall life cycle was probably the worst place for it. Should end up closer to the central part of the entire district, so that then when these redistricting happens, your distance
It's one of the
travel
reasons we
is-
continue to show the geographic center of the district, Mr. Parks, because as Dr. McKibben and I have talked, as I put, I ask him the tough questions like you do me, and he said, well, you shouldn't be building a building down there, Dr. Millman, you need to redistrict. And I said, well, you need, unpack that for me, right? And-
Building placement has always been the problem. I've been fighting with districts on this. We just did a battle with Northwest Allen. We did their redistricting, and they wanted to build their 9th elementary down by Hickory. And I go, that is the absolute worst place to build it. You shouldn't have built Hickory there, And then with them too close together. You need to get them spaced apart because those boundaries need to breathe over the years, okay? Because once you put the building there, you're stuck with it for 50, 60, 70 years. And my favorite one is, and you need examples, just go down to Cobb County, Georgia, because they fell in this trap years ago. If a developer, out of the goodness of their heart, gives you 15 or 20 acres to build an elementary school, 99% of the time you're building it in the wrong place. Because they're not, we don't have a whole bunch of kids here. They're trying to sell their new homes. They got a new elementary school to go to. Problem is, build the school there, fill it up with that subdivision. 10 years later, you can't get a busload of elementary age kids out of that subdivision because they all moved in and they're between 28 and 42 and they've all aged out, okay? Cobb County, they just built those schools right next to them where the developers are at. So they wound up 15 years later with a whole bunch of schools running at 40% capacity and all their growth 20 miles away on the other side of the county. And they've got tenants here like the country of Chile trying to get enough territory and their kids in there. Because when you put that building there, you're stuck with it there. You can't pick it up and move it.
Dr. Mellon, we've talked about students, we've talked about facilities. How will the redistricting affect staffing?
Good question. Yeah. Well, obviously, as the student population moves, the most movement in staff in most of these options will either be Perry Worth to Central or Perry Worth to Hattie B. Stokes, whichever is the recommendation. So you're talking 140 plus or minus students. So 5 to 6 classrooms of teachers would shift. And the way that would work is it's a voluntary process. What we've done in the past is folks will volunteer for transfer, and then it's a discussion between the two principals at that point. If there's more volunteers than there are slots, if there's less volunteers than there is slots, then it becomes an involuntary transfer situation. So, and one of the options you're looking at 5 or so teachers probably moving to Hattie B. Stokes, and 1 to Central. But it's hard to say that exactly because there's 25 to 26 students going from Perry Worth to Central, but they're not all in the same grade level. So there may not be any Perry Worth teacher go to Central, depending on how that happens. But there's a voluntary, then involuntary process, and that'll all start very soon after the decision. Very good question. Special education obviously be moving from Hattie B. Stokes to Centrals. We're moving at least 2 of the self-contained district-wide special ed programs from Hattie B. Stokes to Central. So that's a given that those teachers will be moving.
Can I poll the audience?
Sure show.
Okay. How many of you out here have children in the Lebanon Public School District? How many are going to have any more kids? Get your work cut out for you, lady. More importantly, as soon as your last kid graduates high school, how many are going to sell your house and leave the district? That's the real problem. Everybody I've talked to, and I've been through this district, God, how many times the last 4 or 5 years, everybody I talk to likes living here. They don't want to leave. And that's part of the problem, is you got all these nasty people in their 60s and 70s empty nesters that just won't leave, you know? And that's your real problem, because no one wants to leave. But they are going to die eventually.
Thanks, that's so encouraging. Being
That's
one
my
of those
news to my
people.
fellow baby boomers. They think they're going to live forever. Got newsflash for you. It ain't going to happen. So, and
Very informative. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so
I
much.
like to end on a cheery note like that. So,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so
Anything
much.
else?
Yeah, thanks for your time.
And if those of you in the audience would like to leave comments, there are papers at the end of that table right there by that Diet Coke bottle. You can feel free to do that, or like I said, email or call us or Dr. Milliman. So, thank you.
Thank you.
We are adjourned.